So once you had something that was a little bit more, concrete in terms of the product that was being sold, did you find that affected support and kind of its relationship to that? Like,
Yes.
was support being kind of like a tack on to that product? How did that affect kind of your sales, the revenue, that kind of thing?
So I had a year or two without having any add-on products to sell, and I only had the ability to sell support, and it was at a time when legal departments inside those companies were so concerned about open source licenses that they wanted to pay for indemnity on the distro. So I could sell a contract that was backed by Canonical that had indemnification built within it. So those were the two pieces of value: was support and indemnification. Remember, this is coming from a backdrop of a time when you had all of the patent trolls threatening legal action, and then you had Steve Ballmer referring to Linux as a cancer and how it was going to break 47 or whatever it was of the Microsoft patent. So you had a lot of people very concerned about the impact of running the software inside their organization. So actually I did sell those contracts almost as like an insurance, but what you tended to find is that once a customer realized that, actually this is fine, nothing's like going wrong, we're not getting sued, and now we're starting to ramp up on our training around Linux, people know how to use it and manage it and deploy it, that the value of the support contract was starting to reduce. So actually I found it very difficult to renew those contracts maybe after a year or two.
Yeah, there's a big renewal problem with a lot of open source because you're competing against free.
Exactly.
And you have to, as bad as this sounds, if you're not having problems, the value continues to diminish. So the better software you create, the more unlikely it is someone will continue a support contract, because they'll look and they'll go, I only used it once in the last 2 years. Why am I going to pay X amount of dollars?
But I would think that like at the very big, like for the very big, enterprise customers, like you just need those guarantees regardless of if you're making use of them, though, right?
You would be surprised.
No, you would be. I think you would be surprised. Yeah, I that's what I assumed or hoped, but it didn't always work out that way. When you're paying a couple $100,000 a year for a support contract, you're not getting sued, and maybe you open one support ticket, and you basically the cost of that support ticket is $200,000. It starts to look a bit strange to someone who might want to spend that budget on hiring a new person to do a lot more with the budget that they were given. I certainly that's what I found. It became a little bit easier when we started to sell to more of the banks because they're highly regulated, and at that time. And I think mostly it's the case that if you're running any piece of software, regulation says that you have to have it supported. So in that case, it's slightly easier, but that's not always the case. And even in banks, there's still plenty of open source software that's deployed and run without it being technically being supported.
Yeah, we used to get I ran all of the post sales, customer success, support, managed service, so I ran that. Yeah. And we used to get, companies that would come along and they would say okay, we opened up 2 tickets. We need you to cut 50% off our bill because we didn't use it as much. And if not, then we're going to, bounce, or because it's open source, there's lots of alternatives, right? The threaten to go to, CentOS or, go to Debian directly without,
Right. It's so interesting because I've talked to people at Oracle and they kind of look at the support contract as oh yeah, this is basically pure profit for us. It's just like a 15% gross margin on everything.
But that's because they bake in the costs. You have to have a 20% support fee, and you can't get any updates without support.
I just want not being able to. Okay.
So that was the difference as well. We didn't charge for updates, and I think I might. Again, I'm not entirely sure how the Red Hat model works, but I'm pretty sure that it was slightly different, where you're effectively you're paying the totally open source at the time version was Fedora, and then Red Hat Enterprise Linux was effectively open source, but you would be paying for the maintenance or the updates and the fixes.
And support too. You get support. Yeah. But because it's the Red Hat network.
Yes.
So what it would do is when you would register for the repositories in the Red Hat network, it would then take your username password, and as soon as your support contract expired, that username password no longer works, so you couldn't get the repo. And so that's how they did it.
So that was a bit different. So I was desperate basically for something to sell on top, and Landscape for me did that, and it really helped. But I still had those annoying customers where it was oh, this is open source, you should be paying us for the updates, for the fixes, or can I just pay for a one-off ticket for support? And I was I'm not going to make my number on one ticket, and no, I can't pay you for those contributions. But it was just a very different. It was a very different attitude in those days. It was completely different. Like these days, open source is like normal, and you wouldn't start a business without using open source software. But genuinely, in those days, you were fighting a huge battle in every single customer I spoke to.
Yeah, and it involved a lot of legal.
Yeah,
right.
It did.
Yeah, but how did you go from that though to Mongo?
Well, yeah. So I assumed so Canonical was great. I had brilliant time at Canonical, and I had a great time in engaging customers and selling to enterprises. At Canonical, the thing that I didn't really understand or buy into, or I wanted more focus on, was how to sell software to companies and enterprises. Whereas actually with the Ubuntu phone, and then Ubuntu Ones for storage, and then the talk of an Ubuntu TV and so on. For me, it just wasn't something that I was that interested in. I was more interested in the business to business side. So I was looking for.